Hello there and welcome to Cansanity. Today we're going to be making pasta sauce with fresh herbs and I'm all set up. I have the KitchenAid Ultra Power attached to the vegetable fruit strainer attachment and I have my tomatoes here right beside me and I'm ready to go. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm using the KitchenAid and the vegetable fruit strainer attachment to take the skin on core my tomatoes. And I did a video, it's on cansanity.com and on the YouTube channel, where I'm really showing you how to use and set up this attachment to the KitchenAid. And in that video I also show you how to peel tomatoes, just doing it the old-fashioned way, where you just blanch them, put them in cold water, peel the tomatoes, and then blend them in a blender, and that's how you can also make the puree for your tomato sauce. But it is a real big time saver if you have a KitchenAid and the vegetable fruit strainer attachment. It just goes really quickly, so that's what I'm going to use today. But if you want to see how to do it the old-fashioned way, then check out the other video. Okay, so in my bowl I have tomatoes that I grew. I have some San Marzans, and they are just beautiful, nice and ripe. I also have some small Romas in here, which I cut in half, and so then I'll just put that in the vegetable strainer attachment in a minute. But I did want to say that if you're picking up tomatoes at the market to make your pasta sauce, I recommend getting the San Marzans. That's my favorite. Or you could use any paste tomato though. If you can only find Romas, then pick that up as well. Now what I usually do is I make salsa first, and then I make pasta later in the season, pasta sauce later in the season. And I did happen to pick up some Romas at the market on the weekend, and I sorted through, and any small Romas I put aside because I thought, well, I'll just use that for making my pasta sauce. When the Romas are really small and you're trying to make salsa out of it, the walls are thinner, and so you don't, if you're trying to make a chunky salsa, then it's just, you're not going to get that thickness. So I like to use the bigger Romas for my salsa, and any smaller ones I use for making a pasta sauce. So I'm just going to get started. I keep saying that, but I'm really going to get started now. So all you have to do is just turn your mixer on once it's set up, and then just start putting your tomatoes in, and then bring it up to about a 4, and use your plunger, and the sauce will start coming out here, and the core and peel will come out the other end. I'm just going to turn that up just a little bit more. It's going to get a little loud. Okay, I'm going to finish doing all of that. If you want to again see up close how this works, check out that other video where I'm doing the comparison with the using the mixer and the attachment versus using just doing it the old-fashioned way, blanching the tomatoes and peeling and then pureeing. So I'm just going to finish all this up and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so that took all of 10 minutes to process those tomatoes, and what I'm doing here is I'm taking the peels off and the core, and if you're doing that by hand, you would take the peels off first and then core your tomatoes and then run it through a blender, but the mixer and the attachment does that for you. So this is my nice 3-liter bowl that I got out of 12 pounds of tomatoes. And I had mostly San Marzanos in there, and I had some Romas. Now I have just a little bit left, and so I'll finish processing those, and then we'll move to the next step. Okay, so I put my puree in this pot. I just want to show you that if you're using this, the KitchenAid mixer and the strainer attachment, that when you take off the shield, there's a lot of puree on there still. And so you can just kind of take that off. I didn't do that in my mixer mistakes in my comparison video. So there's a lot of good puree right there. So don't waste that. Get that into your pot as well. Okay, so I have my puree in my pot, and now this is a really large pot. I have 3 batches on the go here, so this is one of my larger pots, but for cooking. But you do need to use at least a 12-liter pot for cooking this puree down. So to the puree, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. And this just sweetens up your tomatoes. So that's 3 tablespoons. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 4 teaspoons of salt. Oops, that's about 1.5 there. That's 2, 3, 4. And if you're going to use kosher salt, then you'll use 2 tablespoons. And then 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. This doesn't splatter all over me. And this is just your flavorings. So now I'm going to stir that down. I'm going to put it on the stove top. I'm going to get it boiling and then turn it down to a simmer. And I'm going to simmer that for 70 minutes. Okay, so I have my pot on. I have it on high to get it up to a boil. And the reason why you want that tall pot is because if you might be able to fit this pretty closely to a 10-liter pot, but it's going to bubble up a bit, so you want to make sure that you have a large pot. And this is my 12-liter pot, and this one I've already cooked for 80 minutes or 75 minutes, and it's a nice thick consistency, and that's what you want to get to. I'm just going to grab my spoon here. This one's cooked, and it's nice thick consistency. And then this is the one that we're just starting. And so about 75 minutes is my desired thickness. You could actually cook it to 80 minutes to get it even thicker. So I'm going to just cook this one down, and then we'll throw in the herbs. Okay, so the puree is reduced, and I cooked it for 75 minutes. So I've just put the lid on so I could just do this next part, just talk about the herbs. So what I like to put in my pasta sauce with fresh herbs is basil, oregano, and parsley. And so on this countertop here, I just brought in one of my plants from outside, and it has oregano planted in here as well as thyme and some sage. And I'll harvest a good chunk of this plant here to get myself half a cup of snipped oregano. And when you grow it yourself, you can get some really nice big leaves on your oregano plant. So I highly recommend growing your herbs yourself if you're doing canning and you want to put them in your sauces. Basil is another wonderful herb to grow in your garden. It's just right there then when you're ready to put it in your sauce, and it's really nice and fresh, so it'll have a really nice flavor. So I have some rinsed basil leaves here, and I'll use 2 cups of snipped basil, and that's measured after it's been snipped. Now under here I have some cilantro and I have some parsley. When I start to process tomatoes in the fall to make my salsa and my pasta sauce, I will buy big bunches of cilantro and parsley at either the farmer's market or at a really good grocer. And the way to keep it nice is to put it in a container and fill it with water, put a bag over top of it, and that'll create kind of a greenhouse effect. And they'll stay nice on the counter for a couple of days if you do that. Just remember to change out the water every day, because otherwise it will, you know, go kind of funky. So anyways, just to take that off there, I've already made my salsa, and if you are interested in learning how to make salsa, then check out my video on Cansanity.com on how to make Mama's Chunky Salsa. And so I have some cilantro left over from that, which I'll use for cooking this week. And then I have some parsley here for my pasta sauce. So I'm just going to put this bag over here, and I'm going to get started with chopping up the herbs. Okay, so I've just grabbed some basil, and I'm just using this 1 cup measure, and just to snip your basil, just snip it like this. You'll get more flavor if you snip it rather than chop it on the board. You don't want to lose any of those oils onto your chopping surface, so I like to snip my fresh herbs for my sauce and for the sauce. Yeah. So that's for the basil. Some basil in there. I'll take that out. And so I'll just go ahead and snip all of this up. Okay, so I have my oregano leaves here that I just took off the stem. You can see how nice and big they are. And so I have about a cup in here, and once I snip that down, that'll be about a half a cup. So I just kind of ball that up like that and just snip away. And that's how I get my snipped oregano done. And so I'll go get back to doing that in a minute. So with the parsley, I've just rinsed it, and I just will take the leaves off. You know, you could eat the stems taste just as good as the leaves, but the texture wouldn't be very good in your pasta sauce. So I take the leaves off, and then I snip those up as well. So I'm just going to go ahead, and so I do the same thing. I would just bunch some up like that, and then I just snip my parsley. So you want about a half a cup of parsley snipped and half a cup of oregano. And the only other spice that you're going to add is, if you want some heat, you can add a teaspoon or a tablespoon of crushed chili flakes. So I'm just going to finish snipping those up, and then we're ready to put it in the sauce, and then we're ready to can. Okay, so my herbs and my crushed chilies are in my sauce, and I put some boiling water in this measuring cup, and I have my funnel in there and my ladle. And my jars were sterilized in 225 degree Fahrenheit oven. And I have my lemon juice that I'm going to need to add to make sure that this sauce is shelf stable. And so the reason why you add lemon juice to each jar that you fill is to make sure that you have the acidity, because there's a variation in the amount of acid that you'll get in your tomatoes. So I'm going to fill the jars halfway with the sauce, and then I'm going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice, and then I'm going to continue to fill until there's about until there is a half an inch headspace. So I'll take my ladle out of here, and my funnel, and I'll just fill about half, and don't forget the lemon juice. It's very important to add this 1 tablespoon to each pint. And then add some more sauce. And then you want that ½ inch headspace, which I'm going to check carefully before I put the lids on. So I'm just going to continue on and fill the rest of my jars. And always remembering to add my lemon juice. Oops. Getting a little bit fast. Take the spoon. Now on the stove I have my canning pot boiling away, ready to go. So that as soon as I'm done filling, I can process these. I always save making pasta sauce until the end of the season because it really is pretty easy to make. And after I make all the salsa that my family likes to eat, I'm pretty much done with tomatoes. But everybody in my family loves pasta, and so I persevere and push through and process some more tomatoes so that my family can enjoy freshly canned pasta sauce all winter long. I'm just going to finish filling these jars, and then I will pick up again on the video when I'm putting the lids on. It looks like I'm only going to get about 5 this time. And you're going to have variation. Sometimes you'll get 6, sometimes you'll get 5, depending on how much water were in your tomatoes and how long you process them on your stove, how hot your burner is. And so don't be stressed out if you only get 5. That sauce is going to be quite tasty because it's going to be quite condensed. Make sure that you get that headspace correct. If you don't have the right headspace, then you run the risk of your sauce or your jar's not sealing. So I just have a smidgen more. It's not going to be enough to process, but you'll have sauce. Either just drink it right out of the jar, or we'll make a little bit of pasta and cook it and then just add it. Okay, so I take a spoon or a knife and I just make sure you stir each jar, just in case there's some bubbles. There shouldn't be because it's quite liquidy. It's not a bad idea to have that habit of stirring everything down. And then we'll just check the headspace. Find my glasses. I'll just borrow the cameraman's. Okay. Yeah, that looks good. A little bit fast on this one. So then I take. Now you always have to wipe down your rim. So I take a little bit of paper towel or a dishcloth and just take some hot water, boiling hot water, and just wipe the rims. You have to do that because if there's a seed on the rim, it will prevent the seal. When you've done all this work, you've cooked this sauce all day, you want to make sure that you get a seal. Yeah, looks good. Here's my glasses. Sometimes when you do that, it settles a bit. So take another look before you put your lids on. Okay, looks good. Okay, so now you take your ring or your lids, and I just put them in my hot water for a couple minutes, and then that just softens the seal. Don't leave them in too long though, don't leave them in for 20 minutes because you don't want the seal to break down. You just want to soften it a bit. Sometimes you end up getting two, so you don't want to put two lids. I've done that, where I've put two lids on a jar and it won't seal if you do that. And now I'll just grab my rings out of the oven. Like I said, I put my jars and my rings in a 225-degree Fahrenheit oven to keep them sterile, to sterilize them, and I leave them in that oven for 10 minutes. You have to leave it in for 10 minutes for them to be sterile. So I'm just going to grab my rings. They're still hot. And I'm just going to, the oven's cooled down so I can actually pick it up. They're so hot, but they're not so hot that I can't pick them up. Next batch, so I have to put that back in the oven to make sure that those jars stay hot. You don't want your jars to cool down, because if they cool down, then when you go to put your sauce in the hot boiling water, they could crack, and then you lose your sauce. So it's happened to me. It does happen every year. I lose one or two jars, but you want to keep your jars nice and hot before you put this hot sauce in. And then I'm just turning the rings until there's just fingertip tightness, not any tighter than that, because you want the air to come out of the jars. That's what the process is all about when you put it in your boiling water cannon. So we're going to just move over to the stove and put them in the pot now. Okay, so now my water is really boiling really well, and that's what you want. And so take off your lid. And now you want to pick up your jars by the neck, not by the ring. And you want to space them out in your pot. Give them a 1-inch space. Or 1-inch room around each other. I only have 5, so there's going to be lots of room in there for the water to circulate around. It's good. Want to make sure that there's at least 1 inch of water above your lid, and I easily have that. These are going to process for 35 minutes, so it's important that there's a good amount of water above it, and there is. So I'm just going to put that lid on, and I'm going to wait till that comes to a full boil again, and then I'm going to start my timer for 35 minutes. Okay, so my timer went off, and they've been processing for 35 minutes. And now you shut off the stove, but don't take the lid off, and let it rest in the pot for 5 minutes. That's called venting. So you want to let it rest for 5 minutes in the pot before taking the jars out. Okay, so the timer went off, so I'll just take the lid off and take the jars out. And so grab the jar by the neck. Don't worry about the water on top, it'll evaporate. That's the last one. And then I'm going to start my pot again because I have some more to go in for my next batch. Okay, so just one tip. I only had 4 full jars on my second batch, and so I put them in the pot, and I don't know if you can see this, but I also put an empty jar in the center, no lid, it's just empty, and I just filled it. It just kind of helps so that the jars, when it's on for so long, for 35 minutes, they kind of move around a bit, and if you have an empty jar in the center, it'll prevent them from tipping over. So that's just a tip if you only end up having like 4 jars or 3, to put an empty jar in the pot. Okay, so my last batch of pasta sauce is in my canner, and I can't wait to be done so I can put up my feet. All the pasta sauce that I processed today sealed, which is just fantastic. Now, I bet you've noticed that I'm actually in a different kitchen, and I'd like to thank my good friends Janice and George for lending me their kitchen today so that I could do this video and make my pasta sauce. And I hope that you are enjoying the Cansanity videos, and if you haven't seen any of my other videos, please go to cansanity.com and check out all the recipes there and all the videos. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a great day.